So I'm here with Professor Curtis Milhaupt from Columbia University Law School, and I would like to ask you first how an attorney, a U.S. attorney and a researcher, got interested in Japanese law.
Well, it was actually quite serendipitous. I first got interested in Japan. I had studied Spanish in high school, even though most of it is now long gone. And I had been a foreign student in Guatemala as a high school student. When I went to college, my undergraduate university had various study abroad programs, and they had one in Mexico, but I had a kind of been there, done that feeling about it, and I wanted to do something different. And at that time, the only country you could go to without prior language training was Japan, because very few schools taught Japanese at that point, very few high schools. So I decided it would be an adventure to go to Japan. I knew nothing about it. So I spent my sophomore year of college there and became intensely interested in the language and the culture and so on, and then continued pursuit of the language and study. So I really first became interested in Japan, and then did a law degree and began to combine my interest in law with my interest in Japan. That turned out to be quite, I think, fortuitous, because it was a time of rising foreign investment, Japanese foreign investment in the United States, and so it was quite a good combination to draw legal knowledge and knowledge about Japan together in the late 1980s and early 1990s when this was happening.
Okay. And you became quite a comparativist, not just Japan, U.S. law, but you've been writing about the impact or the difference of law in Latin America, Europe, and Asia. So what would you say about the role of comparative method for young law students? Is it as important as we think, or it is something that is very marginal in a lawyer's life?
Well, you're talking to someone who spent his career doing comparative legal studies, so I'm going to say that it's very important, but I mean that very sincerely. The answer I will give you is essentially the little pitch that I give to the students on the first day of my Japanese law seminar, and we've specifically raised this question: what are we doing here? Why should students in an American law school be studying the Japanese legal system, or the Chinese legal system, or the Brazilian legal system? And one answer, of course, is because we live in a world in which knowledge of foreign systems is important in its own right. Many lawyers are going to be dealing with clients from Japan or Brazil or China, and it's obviously very helpful to have some background. But I think that that's not the most important reason to do comparative legal studies. I think really the benefits are in generating insights about your own legal system. I think for me, looking at foreign legal systems has exposed and unsettled so many assumptions, just silent, quiet assumptions that I had about my own legal system, about law in general. And when you see the way a different system is structured, it really forces you to step back and to ask yourself, well, why are we doing it this way? This isn't the only way to do it. Here's another system. In the case of Japan, for example, another system, a country that's rich, that's free, that's organized very differently. And so I think it's that spark to inquiry and the unsettling of assumptions that's so important about comparative legal analysis. And I think it takes you into, if you look by subject matters, if you think of some of the great questions that we're all wrestling with today, the relation between national security and individual rights, for example, huge topic in many countries, privacy, information disclosure, affirmative action, development, economic development, response to crises. These are problems that are global in nature, and there isn't one right answer to any of these questions. There are different approaches, and I think bringing together ideas and dialogue among people and learning about how different systems are addressing these questions really deepens the analysis. So I think a very valid criticism, for example, of our Supreme Court is that, at least some members of our Supreme Court, is that they seem very closed-minded about what's happening in other systems, and their, I think, almost knee-jerk reaction is, well, who cares what the Canadians do? We're not Canada. That's, I think, just an extremely short-sighted and narrow-minded way to approach the great problems of the world. We should be trying to gather information, not shout information. So that's a rather long-winded answer, but you can see that I feel quite strongly about this. I think studying one's own legal system alone is not the hallmark of a deep and broad legal education.
This brings me to another point, which is the challenge that globalization put on legal education. I know you're director of the Parker School of Comparative Law. Columbia has been, for a long time, a very cosmopolitan place. What are these challenges? What is changing, or how law schools should change to really provide fruitful education for the new generation of lawyers that have to work in a very cosmopolitan environment?
Well, I'm not sure we have enough time in this interview to answer that question completely. There are so many challenges that legal education faces today. In the United States, as you know, there's a big debate about whether law school should be reduced to 2 years. Let me just use that as a basis for my answer. There's so many things that could be said about this, but in my view, we need the 3rd year, but we need to make sure that it's actually a valuable year. And one way to make it valuable, not the only way, but one way to make it valuable is to send our students out into the world and to bring them down to Brazil to study in your global program, to go to China, to go really anywhere and immerse themselves in another system. I think that's so valuable, and I think the dialogue that we've just finished here with FGV and this global alliance that Columbia Law School and FGV have started is a very good approach to addressing these problems of globalization. So this meeting that we've just concluded could be I think is a very good example of a concrete way to address the challenges of globalization in legal education. So bringing scholars together from the United States and Brazil, focused intensely on a set of common problems that we're thinking about, and then figuring out how to draw students into this dialogue, how to get them involved in our research, how, for example, a Brazilian student who's interested in securities regulation could go to the United States to study with Professor Fox or Professor Coffey, and vice versa. So I think what we've just completed here is a very interesting and important concrete response to the challenges of globalization in the legal education.
Okay. Thank you very much.